Good morning and welcome to West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church. My name's Diane Alcorn and I am the Membership and Engagement Coordinator here. If this is your first time visiting with us, welcome. We're glad you took the time to join us here. If you'd like more information about our church and our worship community, please feel free and send me an email. In the meantime, again, welcome. We're so glad you took the time to join us.
Welcome to West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church, a spiritual community whose hope is audacious and whose vision is for a more equitable and just world for all. I'm Reverend Anthony McCarr, Senior Minister of this wonderful community, and joining me this morning are Dave Blazer, Music Director, Megan Ross, Director of Religious Education and Engagement, Vicki Warden, Worship Associate, and Larry Wise, Christine Solanti, and Michael Hockman, who are our wonderful tech folks making this live stream possible, and we are delighted to make it possible this morning, even with a little bit of delay. Grateful for these folks who know how to work under pressure. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Together, we are pleased to invite you into this space which is connecting people in Cleveland and beyond to our welcoming community. Often the world is not so welcoming. Often the values of the world are neither loving nor just. So may this worship hour be one where our souls are fed by a wisdom and a passion that remind us that life does not have to be that way, that there exists a larger love in every human heart urging us on to what is better. Let this larger love move in our midst today, and may we be changed by it. A special welcome to you if you are a newcomer to our community, gay or straight, cisgender or transgender, black, brown, or white, you are welcome. Our West Shore regulars would love to greet you, and will do that if you indicate on the Facebook chat that you are new or relatively new. If you happen to have any questions and would like to chat with a live person, West Shore's Member and Engagement Coordinator Diane Alcorn would love to reach out to you. Diane's email address is being added to your Facebook chat as we speak. We have a couple of announcements for you this morning from Megan.
Good morning. I have just a few announcements for you today. The first is that we are hosting a parent group for any parents and caregivers who would like to check in and connect. We'll be meeting on Zoom next Sunday, the 13th, at 9:30 in the morning. This group will be led by Barbara Walker. The link to join this group will be in your e-news. Next, I'd like to remind you all that our winter solstice celebration will be on December 20th at 4:30 p.m. Please dress for the weather and bring a bird-friendly ornament. This is a kid-friendly event, but it's open to folks of all ages. Masks and social distancing are required. And lastly, our Christmas Eve family service on December 24th will be at 4 o'clock this year on Zoom. I hope you will join Reverend Anthony and I for songs, story, and candlelight. Registration is required by December 22nd, please, and the link will be added to the Facebook chat in just a moment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan. Just a reminder about the ongoing conversations I'm hosting about West Shore's new organizational plan going into effect. This Wednesday, December 9th, at 6:30 p.m. via Zoom, will be the fifth of 6 conversations that are planned. This fifth conversation is with any and all volunteers involved in the area of ways and means. Ways and means is essentially about time, talent, and treasure. It is about developing the resources that we need to do ministry. And so we're talking fundraising, leadership development, maintaining the building, and so on. If you are a volunteer involved in this area in some way and you have not received an invitation yet, please contact Debbie Elliott in the office and she will get that to you. Each program council will have its own conversation. For more about this, please see the November Shorelines for more. And finally, on Saturday, December 12th at 10 a.m., we will have the last of these conversations. This one is for anyone who might have missed a previous conversation or just anyone who wants to know more about this new organizational system going into effect. A last announcement related to our service auction from several weeks ago. Just a heads up that if you bid on an item in the live auction, you'll be receiving an invoice in the mail this week, so please be on the lookout for that. All unsold items will go back up on our website starting this Monday, December 7th, and they will remain there for 1 week, so be sure to look for that as well. Thank you again and again for your generosity. Total to date, we have raised $32,000, which is amazing. Thank you. Once again, welcome to this new morning. Every week now, as you know, we light our chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. It is a beautiful reminder that no matter how jarring events might have happened over the course of the week, no matter how jarring they may have been, the gathered community that is West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church is a source of stability and a source of meaning that we can all count on. In that spirit, we now say our chalice lighting words, which come to us from a great soul, Maya Angelou. This is our chalice. In many separate rooms, we light one flame, flame of passion, flame of compassion, flame of humor, flame of style. We do not accept merely surviving. Let our mission be to thrive. Together in spirit, we are one. And let us now witness to the unity of our spirit by saying together our unison affirmation words. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia y el servicio su ley. Este es nuestro magnífico convenio, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor y ayudarnos los unos a los otros. So may it be. And now we turn to our time of greeting. We greet each other in the midst of our joys and our struggles. It's a beloved community moment of sharing names and news that people have asked to be shared. Among the West Shore family, we have some birthdays to lift up. Daniel's birthday is today. Sam's is tomorrow. Both Connor's and Aiden's are coming up this Wednesday. Happy birthday to these children of our West Shore community. And a happy birthday also goes to Rachel Abernathy, who turns 80 years old. Happy birthday, Rachel. The flowers this Sunday are dedicated by Ben and Monica Bassett in celebration of their 50th wedding anniversary on December 2nd. Congratulations. Congratulations on an amazing milestone to Emeritus member Rox Kazarian, who will be celebrating her 100th birthday on December 8th. She would be thrilled to hear from her West Shore friends. Cards and notes can be sent to 1255 Pasadena Avenue South, apartment 1811, South Pasadena, Florida, 33707. Look for your weekly e-news. That address is there. Our heartfelt thoughts and prayers are for Kathleen Heck this morning, who is recovering from injuries due to a recent fall. Cards and notes may be sent to her at 3105 Center Ridge Road, Apartment B, Westlake, 44145. No calls at this time, please. Roy Prentice, a dedicated, generous, longtime church member, has died due to complications from COVID-19. He was 98 years old. Sincere condolences to Roy's family and friends. As parish nurse Carol Travis says, Roy was an amazing guy, one of a kind. Let each of us now say the names of people whom we are holding in our personal thoughts and prayers this morning, people in our West Shore community, people beyond. Wherever you happen to be, say into the space of your room these names out loud. You may even type the name into our West Shore Facebook chat, if you like. I'll pause for a moment as we do this. Thank you. This has been our greeting time when we are called out of our 24/7 world, ordinary world, into a time of nurturance and peace. One more step, one more word, one more prayer, one more song. We will do what it takes to create peace for us and everyone. Let's now sing our opening hymn, number 168, One More Step. One more step, we will take one more step, till there is peace for us and everyone. Will take one more step. One more word, we will say one more word, till every word is heard by everyone. We'll say one more word. One more prayer, we will say one more prayer, till every prayer is shared by everyone. We'll say one more prayer. One more song, we will sing one more song, till every song is sung by everyone. We'll sing one more song.
Good morning. I'm Vicki Warden, the associate this morning, who is pleased to offer the reflection and to actually be in the building. This is exciting. The book that Reverend Anthony is going to use for today's focus is called Good White People. That's a pretty good description of most of us. We're good people, and most of us are pretty definitely white. Is that a bad thing? I don't think so, but how did we get here to this particular point? Like some of you, I grew up in a 1950s all-white suburban neighborhood. I was the minority Gentile in an almost all-Jewish elementary school, but that was fine. We all looked alike. Then middle school, high school, they're pretty much the same, but we added a few Catholics and a few Protestants. My ultra-conservative Christian college was even more of the same, but with 2 or 3 black foreign exchange students. You know, I didn't think about it at the time, but I never saw them in the student union or at any of the sorority or fraternity gatherings. They were usually in the library. Getting married, having children, buying a house, all in a nice, white, suburban neighborhood. I never considered otherwise. My career, being a high school teacher and administrator in a all-white suburban high school. To say that I was not aware of racism, let alone systemic racism, would be a very serious understatement. Had you asked, I would have proudly proclaimed that I certainly wasn't racist. But then I'd never even been tested or actually exposed to racism. That was definitely outside my bubble. I could have been the poster child for white privilege. In addition to my English major in college, I had a second major in history. I had managed to cobble together an American literature and history major, which I hope to continue into graduate work. I reveled in the stories of American exceptionalism, attempts at socialist communities, great awakenings, and all the other big ideas in our American history. But I did not remember anyone ever really describing slavery or racial oppression or the fact that we had a pretty dismal record on personal equality. It just wasn't on my radar. I wasn't hiding from those facts. I just wasn't aware. So what happened to my lily white life journey? It's hard to pinpoint when I started to really become aware of the rest of America. It probably began in earnest when I had my career under control, my home life was comfortable, and I had time to look beyond my own needs, wants, and values. I became aware of new terms such as driving while black. I was appalled. I saw the statistics about blacks in jail versus whites. I saw blacks being consistently underestimated and mistreated in any number of ways. You know, a lot of people love football. Others prefer basketball, maybe baseball, but my favorite sport is politics. I'm strictly an observer, and I have absolutely no interest in running for any office. But I love the personal dynamics and watching the players. When I retired 15 years ago, I started working for a political party so that I could be up close to my favorite pastime. It was a great place to be. I could watch everything, but stay in the stands and just cheer for those whom I preferred. Working in politics was not only a great pastime, but I got the opportunity to work with people with whom I never would have otherwise met. Black people, gay people, smart people, well-meaning people, and some real jerks. The jerks were both black and white. Wow, Vicki meets the real world. I am so proud of our Black Lives Matter church banner. I get a good feeling whenever I drive through Bay Village or Rocky River and see a Black Lives Matter yard sign. I'm embarrassed to admit that when that phrase first came out, I was one of those who said all lives matter. What a cop-out, but I'm evolving. Last spring, at the start of this COVID epidemic, I was watching some ABC television talking heads show, and I saw Pierre Thomas tell of an incident that continues to stick and to haunt me. Mr. Thomas is a highly respected ABC political consultant and black. He told of going to the grocery store and very carefully wiping off a grocery cart before he started to shop. A white woman came right over to him, took the cart, thanked him for wiping it off, and merrily went on her way. She assumed that he was the hired help, hired to make her life better. She probably had no idea what she did. I don't think that ever could have been me, but it is to too many people out there. I don't think I have ever read or heard of something that had the effect on me that Mr. Thomas's story had. To be dissed like that, totally unseen. His experience sticks in my mind like nothing else. It makes me aware I've come a long way, and I'm still evolving.
Thank you, Vicki. And it's so good to see her in the house, and I just miss all of you. How wonderful for us to be here again at some point. Thank you, Vicki. Great. As you can tell by now, probably, I love to use the call to offering segment in weekly worship as a time to share stories about how West Shore is making a difference in this world. It is never enough to ask folks to be financially generous in support of this congregation without knowing specifically how your money is being used to create positive change in this world. I just have a lot of good news to share with you this morning. One has to do with a call out a couple weeks ago for people to supply clothing, toiletries, and other items to Urban Hope to support its vital work of caring for Cleveland's homeless. Jillian Cook, one of our Urban Hope volunteers, reached out to let us know that, quote, the collection was one of the, what was the largest that I have ever seen since I have been at West Shore. I have an SUV, and each time I loaded my car to take the items to Jean Kosmak at Urban Hope, I filled the entire vehicle. Just imagine for a moment wearing the same underwear for weeks without being able to wash them. Imagine being out in the cold without hat or gloves to wear. It may be difficult for you to imagine this, but it is an everyday occurrence for many people who live on the street. They do not have access to clean clothing, nor do they have the proper clothing to protect them from the weather. Life just doesn't have to be that way, and now it won't for some people, because West Shore has rallied us together in service to our little corner of the universe. Thank you for responding to our rallying cry. Same thing goes for yet a different initiative, the newest round of Project Check-In. In this time of social distancing, Project Check-In has been one of our ways to ensure that congregants are feeling connected to West Shore. We don't want anyone to feel like they are out there all alone, unconnected, unsupported. To that end, staff person Dorothy Richard writes, "Thank you, West Shore. We were overwhelmed by your response to our request for volunteers for Project Check-In. 45 folks signed up to make calls, with 10 additional volunteers serving as team leaders. Thanks to these volunteers, West Shore members and friends will be receiving calls this upcoming week to check in on how you are doing," unquote. Once again, you are responding to our rallying cry. One of the things we're wanting our callers to ask when they start reaching out in this upcoming week is, would you like a phone call on Christmas Day? We just know that this is a blue Christmas. This is a strange Christmas time, strange holiday season, and there are going to be some folks who are alone on Christmas Day. For whatever reason, if a person wants a phone call, we want to be there. We want to give that call. We want everyone to feel held in the loving arms of this community. Just know that this is happening, and when you receive your call, please pick up. Yet a third item of good news which reflects how this congregation is using its resources to rally people around positive things is the Widening the Circle initiative from this past summer and fall. Dorothy Fowler and Mary Jo Maish created a program where people could enter into a deeply accepting space of storytelling in a non-judgmental atmosphere. Storytelling where people could talk about their personal journey around race. 65 folks participated. It was powerful. Here are some comments people made about their experience. It was a great opportunity to tell my own stories and now to continue to reflect on them. I feel I was challenged beyond what I knew in constructive ways, and it made me more human in the anti-racism work that I do. I hadn't talked with others about my experiences or listened to another person's experiences in such detail. It opened up my thinking and helped me understand and see my white privilege in a different way. And another comment, I think the discussion really energized my commitment to racial justice. I will work to register voters in Cleveland and again, help them get their ballots cast for the next election. All of these voices and so many more positive comments. Thank you, Dorothy and Mary Jo, and everyone involved in the Widening the Circle program. Once again, what a great example of what we at West Shore are doing with our resources to rally people around positive values, to rally people to the goal of being the change we wish to see in the world. When you support West Shore with your time, your talent, and your money, you are helping us in this work of rallying people around good and worthy things. Thank you so much for that. And now, please consider texting a one-time gift to West Shore. Instructions for how to do that can be found on your screen. And now, our offertory. It is from the New Age pianist, composer, George Winston, from his album titled December. This is peace. This is peace. This is peace. Let us take this musical prayer into our very own hearts and minds in this time of meditation and prayer. Take a deep breath in. And breathe out fully. Make it delicious in your mouth. Breathe in deeply. And then exhale fully. Wherever we happen to be, whatever our circumstances, let the tension drain away. Close your eyes if you wish and just hear my voice. Let this moment be a moment of peace. Let it be a moment of peace. Let us now enter into the wise silence. And now, let's consider this video.
You bring up in your book the GI Bill.
Yeah.
Veterans come back from World War II. They're given a head start by the government with certain advantages, go back to school, buy a home, loans, et cetera, et cetera. But it wasn't for all veterans. And so what is the domino effect today that we're seeing from this program?
Well, I think the GI Bill also first-time homebuyer loan programs after World War II. So between 1945 and, say, the mid-70s, we, the taxpayers, invested in things that put millions of families, almost all of them white, on the wealth-building express train. I've friends and family members who got Veterans Administration or Farmers Home Loans, 1%, 40-year fixed-rate loans. Those were racially discriminatory. Black, Latino, First Nations veterans returning to the United States after World War II to sometimes Jim Crow education systems did not have access to some of those GI Bill college benefits. So it's kind of like we put one segment of society on the express train to middle class opportunity, and we left people of color standing at the station for the train that didn't show up. And so a couple generations go by, you know, lo and behold, our home ownership rate, the white home ownership rate is about 70%, and black home ownership rate is like 43%. That, we can point back to that period after World War II as one of the reasons for that.
It goes that far back, wow.
But what's interesting about that is that gave us a clue as we sort of know something about what to do. Like, we used to tax wealth at higher levels and higher incomes, and we invested in public goods. Access to education, first-time homebuyers, infrastructure. Those are all things that are part of a shared prosperity economy that we could do without the discrimination and legacy of racism in implementing those.
Today, we are talking about the social identity of white people in America and how it can be lived in a way that promotes healing and justice. But since both race and class factor into this, since both intersect and mutually reinforce each other, we must talk about middle class identity in America also. We must talk about both at the same time. One interesting clue that this is so comes from the Brookings Institute, which reports the curious finding that many blacks whose actual earnings would qualify them to be in the middle class do not identify as such, or are much less likely to do so than whites. There is, in other words, a quality of whiteness to being middle class that black people are especially sensitive to, and historically speaking, in America, you can trace it directly to New Deal programs from the 1940s, like the GI Bill. A program like the GI Bill helped create what we know of today in America as the middle class, together with its central individualist assumption that if you work hard and if you play by the rules, you will overcome any obstacle and succeed. Conversely, if you fail, well, that's your fault. Something must be wrong with you. Given the video we just saw a moment ago, I hope you have already put two and two together. The GI Bill has been this nation's largest affirmative action program by far, which almost exclusively benefited whites. Blacks were systematically excluded, for the most part, by the stranglehold of Jim Crow and its grip on state governments, South and North, that were given the responsibility for administering it. Blacks were shut out from what scholar Chuck Collins calls the wealth-building express train that the GI Bill essentially was. Given this leg up, white people worked hard, and they did play by the rules, and they did succeed. This is true. But white people then went on to forget about being given a huge leg up. An entire mythology was spun around how white people did it all by themselves. Politicians like Ronald Reagan in the 1980s would speak of such things as welfare queens, and white middle-class minds would imagine people who are lazy, people trying to game the system, and they would imagine themselves as the innocent and virtuous ones in this scenario who were being unfairly victimized. As for the faces that the white middle class would conjure up in their imaginations at Reagan's provocation, well, black faces. They would imagine the faces of blacks. even though this most definitely does not reflect reality. When Reagan spoke of welfare queens, he was essentially blowing a race and class-based dog whistle. He was not the first to do such a thing, and he most definitely has not been the last. Again and again, class and race, race and class. But what I especially want you to see here is the extraordinary quality of self-deception underlying all of this. There is an extraordinary quality of convoluted logic and misunderstanding in the white person's mind that regards success as something earned purely through individual effort, condemns others who may not be as successful as lazy or stupid, and in no way acknowledges the larger historical and systematic causes of things like poverty or racism that can crush even the most hardworking and intelligent of individuals. The thing is, the middle-class equation of individual hard work plus playing by the rules equals success blinds white people to the reality of forces that are not individual but systemic forces, which the poor know all too well, and people of color also, and others. This is the main way by which the middle-class consciousness is a serious impediment to fighting systemic racism. Class and race, race and class. This understood, we are ready to fully engage the topic of the journey towards the psychological and spiritual health of middle-class white people. There are stages to this journey. Many of the stages are characterized by certain kinds of threats, together with survival strategies that people unconsciously develop to cope. The healthiest stage is where a person no longer responds to their world via robotic survival strategies and faces the fullness of their reality, all its joy, all its woe, with courage, with compassion, with creativity, with a sense of humor and appreciation for complexity, and a deep sense of humanity. At this healthiest stage, the work of healing and justice flow out of self-love and love for the world. And this represents quite a change, for in earlier stages, the work was compelled by self-disgust and fear. I consulted many scholars of many races whose specialty is the study of white identity development. Initially, I was surprised to discover that such a specialty exists, but it does. Some of these researchers I consulted include Rita Hardiman, Janet E. Helms, Joseph G. Pontoretto, Wayne Rowe, Haresh B. Sabnani, and Daryl Wing Su. Much of what I am about to say tracks their findings. I will say that the emphasis on threats and survival strategies is mine, and so is the affirmation of class as an integral factor in how a white person grows over time. There are essentially 7 stages in the journey of white identity development towards healing and health. And this is a lot to cover, I know. But how rare the opportunity to get a bird's eye view of the entire forest when day-to-day life is usually caught up in the details of just a few trees. Knowing middle-class white identity from a big picture perspective is very important to the effectiveness and quality of our racial justice work. So here we go. Stage 1. It takes place from birth to about 4 to 5 years of age. And during this phase, white babies come to develop a bias in favor of white and against black. Research shows that babies as early as 6 months old notice racial differences and how their caregivers respond. Take, for example, the white caregiver who believes that merely talking about race is racist. A lot of whites believe this. They think that the best sort of talk takes a strictly colorblind approach. So, race differences become unmentionable in that family. But to a baby, not to acknowledge something as obvious and as in your face as race difference means that something must be really wrong. It's not that babies are thinking this through consciously and rationally. They aren't capable of that yet, but they still sense some kind of threat, which is enough to trigger the reptilian part, one of the oldest part of our brains. The reptilian part of the brain triggers it to activate a survival strategy. A survival strategy gets born, and that survival strategy is avoidance. Black is somehow bad, somehow forbidden, somehow dangerous. Note how this white baby's identity, the white identity of this baby, is being formed through feelings of fear towards the other. And that fear, which is a primal fear, may stay in place for life. But what if a baby's caregiver, what if they are overtly racist? Say, a white baby who is 4 years old expresses positive curiosity about a black person. Or maybe this same 4-year-old white baby talks about a black person in a way that is respectful. This breaks the social rules of the overt white racist's world. The child must learn, so they are chastised. And chastisement works because the threat that babies face by rejection, from the threat that they face is rejection by their caregivers. If they are rejected, they fear the worst. They will die. The reptilian part of a baby's brain lights up, and the result is the survival strategy of conformity, of cutting off parts of yourself in order to be acceptable to people your very survival depends upon. And once again, a baby's white identity is being formed through feelings of fear, fear that may stay in place for life. While all this is happening, children from birth through 4 or 5 years of age are also being socialized to be faithful members of the middle class. They are taught to experience themselves as individuals whose hard work earns their success. They are taught to judge others only on the basis of the individual actions of these others. But at the same time, there's all this unconscious bias and fear that they feel towards black people, which black people have done nothing to deserve. It is self-contradictory. It is very confusing. White children can just feel so very confused about the whole thing. But then comes stage 2. Stage 2 represents the completion of the white socialization process, started by caregivers and extended by educators, peers, the church, media, the larger surrounding community. By this time, things are no longer confusing. Things have, in fact, become very clear. The white person knows what to say and what not to say. They are completely versed in middle-class values that make a person blind to the reality of systemic oppression. This is when a white person might think that just talking about race is racist. When they hear stories of black drivers being pulled over by police at rates that dramatically exceed whites being pulled over, when they hear of black people being incarcerated at rates that, compared to whites, boggle the mind, always they go back to that middle-class ideology that lays blame solely on the individual. That individual black person must have done something. This individual black person must have done something. Even the most obvious, unjustified, egregious assault can be explained away if the victim was not absolutely perfect, in behavior and did not have a perfect record. Stage 2, white people just can't conceive of systemic oppression. A sign like Black Lives Matter feels to them like hatred. In fact, if there's any sort of threat that is felt by stage 2 white people, it's the threat that some other is actively trying to take away what they think they have earned solely through their individual hard work. Stage 2 white people, therefore, call up a survival strategy of hostility and invective towards social and political liberals, and call them libtards and snowflakes, and worse. Stage 2 white people are on constant guard against liberal elites who, for some perverse reason to their way of thinking, want to enable lazy people who are black and brown, and yes, the poor white, to be even lazier and to sponge off of society through higher taxes. White identity development theorists say that some white people can stay in stage 2 for many years, even a lifetime, unless something truly powerful happens to threaten the stage 2 white person's bubble. Call this stage 3, the dissonance stage, or the disturbance stage. The white person watches video of a police officer with his knee on a black man's neck, and that man ends up dying horribly. This is after seeing all of the other videos of all the other deaths of all the other black men and women at the hands of police. It is the straw that broke the camel's back. Disturbance of the white bubble can happen just like that. Or the person starts to learn some history. White identity development researcher Rita Hardiman quotes someone who once read a library book. "I was a grown man," this white person says, before discovering that George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, those wise, saintly men whose pronouncements on liberty and justice leaped from my textbooks and echoed from the mouths of our Independence Day orators, that they had owned slaves. It was shocking to learn that demigods who had influenced documents affirming the thrilling, limitless doctrine that all men are created equal had been otherwise capable of holding men in bondage for the profit from their sweat. I well remember discovering these new lessons in the Midland County Library in my 21st year, and then standing outside, looking up at the wind-swept streets and thinking, hell, if they lied to me about that, they've lied to me about everything. Or maybe it was a preacher who one day happened to talk about the GI Bill and how it was a wealth-building express train, but just for white people. And so it happens now to that white middle-class myth of self-created success. A white person can move on to stage 3 in all sorts of ways. Through interactions with people, through events in society, through information presented in the media, in books, in church, and elsewhere. However it happens, the eventual result is severe disorientation, because part of the privilege of whiteness is to not know. White people just do not know that they don't know. So when they do come to know, it is shocking. They find themselves in disbelief. How could trusted loved ones and teachers not have said anything? Does this mean that they intentionally lied? How could they have lied? What does it mean about the success of people I have looked up to? What does it mean about my success? Am I a fraud? Am I a phony? Am I a sucker? The threat a white person feels in stage 3, the magnitude of it, cannot be underestimated. It is the existential threat of total self-disgust. The entire ugliness of racism in America since at least 1619, when the privateer, the White Lion, brought 20 African slaves ashore to Jamestown in Virginia, crashes down upon a white person. You look upon the world, and present arrangements that used to seem normal, inevitable, and the result of benign choices are now exposed, and the result as the result of past violence and cruelty that whites have all but forgotten until you dared remember, until your eyes were opened. Slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, GI Bill exclusion, new Jim Crow, school-to-prison pipeline. It is not permitted, says black writer James Baldwin, that the authors of devastation should also be innocent. You just feel yourself as unclean and impure, innocent no more. Yes, you were not a slave owner. Yes, you were not a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Yes, you were not a legislator whose vote affirmed Jim Crow laws. But your life today benefits from what they did, while blacks suffer and blacks die. The sin has been passed down to the children. The children feel the sin as a stain on their souls. There is the feeling of uncleanness. There is the feeling of self-disgust. And what is disgusting does not deserve to live. What is unclean must be cast out. The reptilian part of the human brain in a white person goes on overdrive at this point, and because it is all about threats and survival strategies, that reptilian part of the brain generates at this moment two very different survival strategies which have only one thing in common: not flight, not freeze, but fight. Call one of these survival strategies stage 4. White identity researchers give it different names. Janet Helms calls it reintegration. Joseph Pontoretto calls it defensiveness. Haresh Sabnani calls it retreat. Essentially, the individual white person salvages their sense of self-worth by disengaging from the race issue and withdrawing into the white world. Some folks also, and at the same time, actively blame the victim. All the feelings of self-disgust, all the feelings of self-impurity, they are weaponized as instruments of resentment towards black people and other minority group individuals. It is stage 2 all over again, but with a vengeance. Further truths about historical oppression, they're going to come knocking, but the stage 4 white person resolutely refuses to open that door ever again. Instead, they surround themselves with an echo chamber of alternate reality truths and conspiracy theories. These are the white people who are over-the-top zealous about making America great again. Again, the reptilian part of the human brain is on overdrive. The revelations of stage 3 are explosive, and they threaten with feelings of soul-shaking disgust towards self and other white people. So, the survival strategy is to passively withdraw and/or fight back, blame the victim. But not everyone goes from stage 3 to stage 4. This is where the idea of white people moving from one stage to the next in lockstep and continuous fashion, it falls flat. White identity theorists have found that quite a few people go from stage 3 straight to stage 5. They are still fighting to save themselves from enormous feelings of self-disgust. But the direction that their fight takes is very different. Janet Helms calls it immersion. Joseph Pontoretto calls it zealotry. Here, in stage 5, is where white anti-racism emerges for the first time. The white person throws themselves into it with a passion in pursuit of a deeper understanding of racism in America and of white privilege and of how to become a part of the solution. And this is a very good thing. This is a very good thing. However, at this stage, a white person still imagines their world, as a middle-class person would, on purely individualistic terms, and still doesn't truly get the reality of racism as systemic. This is a real problem, because a white person's privilege is not a wholly personal possession that they can get rid of or do with whatever they want. Privilege is systemic. Privilege is reinforced through the policies and practices of the education system, law enforcement, employment, housing, and on that benefit whites and do not benefit blacks. This is what it means to say that racism is prejudice plus power. Racism is not primarily on the level of individual interactions between individual people. While niceness shown across racial lines is an admirable and important thing to do, it is not going to make racism go away. But they don't necessarily get this at a truly deep level. And so white people at stage 5 can act like anti-racism is something they can completely succeed at, that they can win at, if only they work hard enough, and if only they are zealous enough. Stage 5 zealotry exists on a continuum, and at the extreme, what manifests is out-and-out perfectionism. Perfectionism and endless games of gotcha. The extremely zealous white person at stage 5 may reject all things white as categorically bad and value all things black as categorically good. They want to be woke. They are endlessly vigilant in patrolling their unconscious biases and those of other whites. They like to signal their anti-racism virtue and use all of the up-to-date anti-racism terms and criticize people whose vocabulary might be a little bit antiquated. And then there is a thing called cancel culture, where conversations that could have been genuine learning opportunities are turned into public humiliation, where context for saying something gets lost, the facts are distorted, and nowhere to be found in any of this, nowhere, is compassion. There is so much to be said about stage 5 anti-racism. The intentions are all good, but more problems are generated than solved. One is that whites at stage 5 cannot stand whites at stage 4 and tend to see them as inhuman, as inexplicable. Civil rights icon, the Reverend C.T. Vivian, God rest his soul, and I will say I knew that man. He once said, when you ask people to give up hate, you have to be there for them when they do. But with stage 5 anti-racism, you won't be. You won't be. Another problem is a pattern of stage 5 white people over-promising and under-delivering, the classic case of which is Unitarian Universalism's black empowerment controversy in the late 60s and the early 70s. That's a whole raft of sermons in itself, but here I mean to articulate the overarching thing, over-promising and under-delivering. Yet other problems include people of color being burned out or just not treated as real human beings with both gifts and flaws. And then there is this problem, the appearance of one circular firing squad after another, of white people whose deep personal shame inevitably erupts in the form of rage, because that is where shame always goes, to rage. The tragic irony is that this rage gets unloaded upon people who are supposed to be fellow, well-intentioned white anti-racists. White identity at stage 5 does indeed reflect positive growth in the very needed direction of anti-racism, but it is still a survival strategy like the others, meant to defend against powerful inner feelings of self-disgust. It is self-focused. But what the world needs is more whites who are more at peace with their personal issues, so that they can stop getting in their own way as they serve people who are truly more vulnerable, a focus that is less and less distracted by inner noise. Like we heard Vicki say earlier, there is need for evolution. So, on to stage 6. A stage 6 white person finds themselves in a place of creative frustration. At stage 5, they tried as hard as they could to purify themselves from any connection with racism, and they goaded themselves on with guilt, and with shame and other negative emotions. But no matter how hard they worked, they learned that they could not remove their white privilege, that they could not stop benefiting from racist policies and practices of the education system, law enforcement, employment, housing, and on and on. Their zealousness knew no bounds, and still they hit the wall. The middle-class mentality around individualism is just not working. It's got to go. So does cancel culture and that shame-triggering rage dynamic that fuels circular firing squads in our liberal communities, which exhausts our communities, if not fracturing them completely. There is frustration. There is disillusionment. There is exhaustion. There has to be a better way. But what is this way? At stage 6, the white person knows enough to say, quite honestly, that they don't know yet. And perhaps this is perfect timing. This is perfect timing to really hear something that James Baldwin said in his book from 1963 entitled The Fire Next Time. He said, "White people in this country will have quite enough to do in learning how to accept and love themselves and each other. And when they have achieved this, which will not be tomorrow and may very well be never, the Negro problem will no longer exist, for it will no longer be needed." All their lives, from stage 1 all the way to stage 5, fear and threats and survival strategies have been at the center of what it means to be white. In stage 1, whites are avoiding a dangerous other, and they are compromising their self-integrity so that they don't displease caregivers and die. In stage 2, whites are suspicious towards people who are trying to steal from them and take what is away from them, that is what is rightfully theirs. In stage 3, whites are overwhelmed by self-disgust, and so they either go to stage 4 and defend against this self-disgust by fully withdrawing into the white world and or by blaming the victim, or they go to stage 5 and defend against this self-disgust by taking up a perfectionistic style of anti-racism with zeal, often excessive zeal. Over and over and over, what we are seeing in this journey of white identity development is a pattern of threat resulting in some survival strategy response that just creates more problems than it solves. But is there a way to stop merely surviving and to thrive, finally to thrive? Can white identity grow beyond something that is essentially fear-filled to something more positive? Baldwin says, it won't be tomorrow when whites get there, and it may very well be never. I hope and I pray he is wrong about that. You know, I can't come to you today to say that I have the perfect answer, that I know the solution, the way. But here is what I believe. No one can do this work for white people. White people have to do this work for themselves. I am white and I am publicly owning this work, which is, as Baldwin suggests, white people finally and fully accepting the ineradicable impurity of being born white and owning that with compassion and courage. White people, you and I, giving up perfectionism and a need to be pure, admitting that mistakes are going to happen. They're going to be a part of the deal. Seeing ourselves on a justice journey, facing social problems that will always be way bigger than any of our individual change efforts. So it is a race that as individuals we can never finish, we can never win, but we will never give up on it. We will not, because we run this race not out of fear, but out of compassionate, courageous love for our white selves and for all. Love, even for whites at stage 4. Love, which tries to build bridges of understanding, not a wall. Are we done with all talk of walls anyhow? Love, says James Baldwin, takes off the masks that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within. I use, he says, the word love here not merely in the personal sense, but as a state of being or a state of grace, not in the infantile American sense of being made happy, but in the tough and universal sense of quest and daring and growth. James Baldwin is a black man. This is what a black man wants for white people. Stop relying on survival strategies and find your healing. Find your way to thriving. Allow compassion to help you realize the degree to which white identity from stages 1 all the way through 5 is anchored in fear. Allow compassion to help you acknowledge that moving out of fear is not like flipping a switch. It takes as long as it takes. Allow compassion to take you beyond fear to a place of spiritual realization where you realize that whiteness is something done to people, but there is another identity beneath and beyond all socialization categories of race and class and anything else done to a person through socialization. There is another identity that we were born with that socialization cannot change, cannot distort, cannot take away, and we Unitarian Universalists describe it as our inherent worth and dignity identity. And some people will even call it our child of God identity. And that identity is the power of love. And if we can live more from that identity, well, we will have the courage to love more than we ever thought possible. Compassionate, courageous love is the strategy, not in the infantile American sense of being made happy, but in the tough and universal sense of quest and daring and growth. Such love is like a gospel song that makes your heart swell, and it grows too big to want to leave anyone out, including your own flawed self. And you just act like that every day of your life. Justice work flows out of that. When we are truly ready to live into this, because we have gone through all the other stages and there's just nowhere else to go. And it's just like writer Anais Nin says, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. When that day comes, when we are truly ready, that is stage 7. May all white people finally get there. Amen. And now we sing our closing hymn, number 1028, The Fire of Commitment. From the light of days remembered, burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living brings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. Now bring your chalice close to extinguish it as I extinguish our chalice here. We extinguish our flames, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we meet again. So remember, coffee hour, we are finishing our service quite a bit later than we usually do, so perhaps coffee hour will begin right after this service has ended. I will see you at the sermon chat at 12:30 on Zoom. And now our benediction. These are wise words from Rabbi Hillel. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? And if I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? Let the time for healing be now, so the time for service to others is full and unburdened. Now is the time. So may it be. Amen. Love, courage, and cheer to you, West Shore. See you next week.